Hi, I'm Deborah Dahab. I'm an expat coach and intercultural psychologist. I'm here today to talk about moving overseas with kids. This is something that people have asked me a lot. And although I'm not specialist in children, as a parent and as someone who has seen many expats go through this, I do have a certain amount of, you know, tips and ideas that can help you make the transition for yourself and for the little ones a bit easier. So some of these tips will depend on the child's age. Some of them will depend on certain specific circumstances. So if you have specific questions or comments, I'd love to hear them in the comment section below. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I will love to hear from you in your comments. So let's get to it. Moving abroad with kids. So moving abroad and moving, becoming an expat or a repat for that matter, moving back home, but that's a whole other issue. Moving with kids is it's a lot different from moving alone. You are ultimately responsible and very influential in another person's adjustment in a new culture, as well as your own adjustment, right? So these are some practical tips that I'm going to give that, some clients have tried, I've read in books, I've seen some people talk about this in my workshops, and as a parent, I also observe in children. So the first thing I would say is that as much as possible, include your kids in the decision-making process. Of course, if they're little, they won't even hardly understand what's going on. If they're a bit older, they will be more aware. So as much as possible, have them participate in decision-making process. Of course, you're not going to leave to the child the decision of where you're going to live, which house you're going to choose. But for example, let them make certain decisions, like for example, the color of the paint they're going to use in a new room, or a certain piece of furniture that they want to buy in their new house. So these feelings, the feeling that they are a little bit in control of what happens, I think makes a lot of difference. And it takes a bit of time because, it's interaction, and sometimes it's just easier to decide and get it over with, and you're overwhelmed anyway. But it's an important process because I think it's an investment of time that you will gain. You will have fruits of it in the future with the adjustment. As much as possible, make plans together. So get, the excitement juices going, and let's visit the school, and, let's go to the new park and go online, show them the new city or the new place. That's a little bit about, involving them in the process, but also making it fun and making it very light, so I say, because there are going to be hard parts of it. So as much as possible, looking towards the future in a bright way. Regarding another practical issue that I think is really important is don't pack important toys. So there are certain toys that the child relies on for comfort. And it can be a blankie, it could be a teddy bear, it could be a certain doll, it doesn't matter. If you're a parent, you know what I mean. So these objects have to go with the child. It's very important that happens because it's a source of comfort for them. And then their life is going to be upside down for perhaps a while. And it's important for them to have that with them. So try to avoid packing these things and shipping them because you never know if it's going to take a while for the moving people to actually deliver this stuff. So have that one or two toys that are really important with the child. That's really, I think that's really important because it gives them a sense of comfort. One thing that I've read in a book, and I've also seen other people do that, and I found it really interesting, is that you can create a tradition. So this is especially relevant for people who move around a lot. So if it's just one move, it might not be relevant, but if it's someone that, has to relocate every 2 or 3 years, this could be relevant. And it's, create a tradition. So whenever they're in a new house, they can, for example, I don't know, before they paint it, they can write on the walls, or they can have pizza, I don't know, whatever it is. Just make it fun and something that they might want to look forward to. So that's especially relevant for people who relocate multiple times in a somewhat short period of time. One thing that we know about children, especially a little bit younger ones, I would say under 6 years old, 7 years old, is that routines are super important, right? It gives the child the sense of security and knowing what's going to happen. And we've all heard about bedtime routines and so forth. So if you have a routine in place, if it's a bedtime routine, for example, try your best to keep that going. If you have a certain routine, like some people have, like, I don't know, Pizza Friday. So every Friday they have pizza. Try your best to keep that in your new environment because it will give the child a sense of continuity. And I think that's really, really important. I also suggest to people that have kids to, and this is valid for with kids or not kids, because one thing that we hear a lot is that people crave connection, right? And it's hard to make friends in a new country. So when you get to the new country, you find yourself kind of lost. To solve that, you can, prior to your move, connect with people online, parents, with children around the same age, and have already set up some play dates or some coffee meetings so you can get to know people offline, in person, as soon as you get there, because it can really help with tips and other practical aspects, and just knowing that there's this one person that gets you. Usually there are going to be other expats who have been through that and can be a real important source of information, of comfort, and then can really help. So don't wait until you're in your destination, overwhelmed with unpacking and everything else, to connect. And it's also going to give you a good excuse, if you already have the coffee meetings and the play dates set up, to get out a little bit of the craziness of settling in, because it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So basically, these are the main tips that I have for people moving with children. And one final tip is that if the child is old enough to understand, and this would be possibly maybe around 7, 8-year-olds, or even preteens or teenagers, which is a whole other matter. Teenagers are, I'm not referring to teenagers here mostly because that's a whole different aspect. But if the child is old enough to understand, you can show them the chart and the typical phases of cultural adjustment. I will put a link here on the video so you can look at the video that I talk about the cultural adjustment phases, and you can explain to them that it's normal to go through a more, sadder phase and disconnected, and it's really normal to do that. It's really normal to go through that. It's important also for the parent to know themselves, because as much as we want to avoid it, the children will feed off our energy, right? So if we're stressed out, if we're anxious, we're going to let that show, and the child will pick up on that. So as much as possible, work on your own self-awareness and check in with your own emotions so you can deal with it within yourself and also be able to deal with it with your child. And finally, I think it's really, really important to stay connected to family and friends back home. So, children will have friends, the early age, sometimes of 4 or 5, they already have friends that they can really connect to. So have schedule already before you go Facebook lives, not Facebook lives, but FaceTime or Skype meetings or Zoom meetings, so the children can connect with their friends and family and they don't feel so disconnected. Technology is, of course, it's not the same thing, but it's close enough. And just looking at, the faces and seeing and talking, it really does wonders. So especially in the first times or when things get tough, it's comfortable to look back and see that you have friends back home and that people enjoy talking to you and you also enjoy talking to them. It can be a sense of comfort. So I hope this video was helpful, and please subscribe and let me know what you think. Thank you. See you next week.